Hello. Very warm welcome to everybody here. Thank you for joining today's virtual knowledge series event, Financing the Circular Economy, Emerging Trends and Opportunities for Canada, which is brought to you by Circular Economy Leadership Canada and UNEP FI, or the United Nations Environment Program Finance Initiative. We had a lot of interest in this session, so a very warm welcome and thank you for making time to join us. We had over 530 people register for this event. Lots of interest from not only the finance sector, including banks and investors and insurance companies, but also businesses, governments, academic institutions, NGOs. We'd like just to invite you to take a moment and introduce yourself in the chat box. So please share your name, your organization with us. We'd love to know who's on the line. And I'd love to start with an acknowledgement that I am joining today from the unceded and ancestral territories of the Coast Salish peoples, more specifically the Lekwungen-speaking peoples of the Songhees Nation here in Victoria, BC, where I'm based. And I'm very fortunate to be able to call this area my home, that I get to live and play on these lands that are so rich in history and culture and to share in their stewardship. And I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge that we have participants joining us virtually from Indigenous territories from right across Canada, and even some international participation today. So thank you for taking a moment to recognize the lands you're on. My name is Paul Shorthouse. I'm the Managing Director of Circular Economy Leadership Canada, and I'll be one of your co-hosts for today's virtual event. And I'm joined by Peggy Lefort, who's the Pollution and Circular Economy Lead at UNEP FI, and she's based in Paris, France. We'll hear from Peggy in just a moment, but just to give you a little background, CELC is a solution space of Generate Canada, which is a nonprofit charity organization formerly known as the Natural Step Canada. We provide thought leadership and technical expertise in collaborative platforms focused on accelerating systems change and building the circular economy ecosystem here in Canada. And we're made up of a network of more than 65 partner organizations across the country, and also serve as a bridge to similar networks globally. And we work on a number of different issues. Critical enablers is a focus of ours, and issues that are of strategic importance to advancing the circular economy in Canada, one of which is on improving access to capital to support circular economy businesses, projects, and infrastructure investment. And I'll pass it to Peggy to introduce UNEP FI.
Thank you, Paul, and good morning, everybody. So I'm Peggy Lefort from UNEP FI. I lead the Pollution and Circular Economy workstream, and I'm really delighted to be with you today. And it's very exciting to see the interest for this topic. So just a few words to briefly introduce UNEP Finance Initiative, UNEP FI, which is a UN-convened network of banks, interests, and investors accelerating sustainable development. So we work with more than 500 financial institutions, which represent more than 170 trillion assets, to agree on frameworks and norms, and to provide guidance to advance market practice and on sustainable finance. And we catalyze action across the financial system to align economies with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Climate Agreement, the Global Biodiversity Framework, and other global sustainability frameworks. And we co-create with our members practical research tools and peer exchange forums to help financial institutions deliver on their sustainability journey for stakeholders. We have, you see here, an overview of our membership across regions, and so with 38 members in North America, and globally 549 members, which are composed of banks mainly, which are 70% of our members, and 30% are insurers. And that is growing steadily at a rate of 7.2%. So that's who we are at UNEP FI, and so once again, very excited to be with you today. Over to you, Paul.
Great. Thank you. Just to share a little bit about today's webinar and our objectives, there's three main focus areas. We really want to increase awareness on the nascent but growing topic of circular economy and circular finance, more specifically in the Canadian context. We are hoping to share a little bit about some of the latest global and Canadian perspectives on circular finance and some of the trends that we're seeing in this landscape. And we want to also be able to chat a little bit about how circular finance can be used as a tool for achieving ESG or environmental social governance priorities and linkages with climate, nature loss, and other socioeconomic opportunities and priorities. So we'll start by providing just a bit of background context for today's webinar, and then we're delighted to be joined by Diego Bermudez with the finance team at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who's based in the UK, and will share some global perspectives on the emerging trends they're seeing. Following Diego's presentation, we'll unpack the Canadian perspectives on the importance of circular finance, and we'll hear a little bit from finance sector actors directly. And we do invite you to send us your questions for the speakers in the Q&A box as we go along, and we'll try to bring some of those questions forward today. You know, with the level of interest we've had, we will not likely be able to get to all of the questions, but we'll certainly take those back, understand kind of where questions lie with the audience here, and potentially send some follow-ups in the reporting out after the session. You can also share your own information or any relevant links that you'd like in the chat box so that participants can take that away, and we'll include that in the summary when we send that out. So just to kick things off, we wanted to start with a poll to understand where our audience are at in terms of this topic. So 2 questions, and you should see the poll pop up on your screen in just a moment. The first one is, how familiar are you with the concept of circular economy? And it's a sliding scale from 1 to 5. So let us know your thoughts there. Actually, I think it starts at 0. And then, has your organization had challenges in securing financing or funding for your circular economy projects or activities if you're involved in that space? And there's an opportunity there to weigh in on those. So maybe Kiana, if you could bring up the polls, and we'll give people just a moment to respond to those. Get a sense of the level of knowledge on this topic with this group, and also the financing question. Responses are coming in fast and furious. I think we're up at 150 responses now. So another 20 seconds, and then we'll share back the results with the group. All right, Kiana, maybe you'd like to broadcast those results, and in just a sec. What we're seeing here is a fairly good level of understanding of the topic of circular economy, which is good because we're not spending a lot of time on circular economy 101 today, but also some pretty clear challenges, I think, with funding, either huge challenge or at least some challenges with about 50% of those participating on the line here. So interesting to see those results. And that's great. Thank you for participating in that poll. So just to set some background context, at the highest level, circular economy is a system where we consider materials never becoming waste, and that we're able to maximize the value from those resources. And really, the circular economy looks to decouple economic prosperity from the consumption of finite resources. In a circular economy, products and materials are kept in circulation through strategies like redesign, maintenance, reuse, repair, refurbishment, remanufacturing, and sort of end-of-life recycling. Or they get returned to the earth through practices like regenerative agriculture and composting and other sort of biological loops in that sense. And the circular economy has been shown to present a multi-trillion-dollar global opportunity to recapture the value from our waste streams and through the redesign of our products, our services, and our supply chains. So Canada's consumption rates, as you may be aware, are some of the highest in the world, and research by the Council of Canadian Academies expert panel on the circular economy found that Canada is only about 6% circular today, with about 73% of our resources ending up as waste in the landfill or incinerated, and much of these materials still hold an enormous amount of value. The expert panel also pointed out that circular economy provides an opportunity for Canada to become more economically successful, environmentally sustainable, and also socially equitable. And we know that circular economy strategies will be essential for achieving net zero goals as it relates to climate change, because they consider the greenhouse gas emission reductions across sort of the entire life cycle of a product, including those related to sort of upstream supply chains and raw materials, the use phases, and their end-of-life treatment, which includes the 45% or so of global greenhouse gas emissions that come from how products are manufactured and used. And also from a nature perspective, from a nature loss perspective, about 90% of nature loss is a result of resource extraction and processing. And that includes in areas like food and in forest management and fiber for textiles or in buildings and materials and construction. So huge opportunity here. And when we think about finance and circular finance more specifically, it's any type of investment, financial service, or financial tool that supports the transition to more circular business models and supply chains. So there's been an emerging focus globally on circular finance with a connection between circular economy and circularity to net zero, and nature loss, like I just mentioned, and other ESG or socioeconomic goals and opportunities, which is starting to drive interest. And we're seeing, in addition, that circular economy is showing up as and being identified as a critical environmental objective within many sustainable finance taxonomies and green bond frameworks globally, including, as many will know, the EU and its Sustainable Finance Action Plan, but also we're seeing it in the UK and in Australia, New Zealand, and in China's Green Bond Framework, and in Southeast Asia, for example. This table sort of shows in that red column there where circular economy as a priority is showing up within these different countries' sustainable finance frameworks. In Canada, the work of the Sustainable Finance Action Council and others on sustainable finance and the green and transition taxonomy has focused primarily on climate mitigation. So there has been so far, at least to date, very little focus within Canada's sustainable finance work on circular economy models, which presents a gap, but also an opportunity for the work that we've been doing with UNEP FI and Canadian finance sector partners. So beginning in the fall of 2022, in collaboration with UNEP FI and 5 Canadian banks and credit unions, and also with technical support from Delphi and Ivey School of Business, as you can see from the logos here, we began work to better understand the opportunities for financing circular economy efforts and also what benefits the circular economy could bring to financial institutions in Canada. And an important output from that work was a guidance document, which was released earlier this year in both English and French, and that includes a sector and technology agnostic definitional framework, which is designed to support FIs in Canada with lending and investing towards circular economy projects and activities and initiatives. So we can drop a link to this guidance document in the chat box so people have access to that. Essentially, there's a categorization or definitional framework within the document that's based on 5 different groupings and 14 subgroupings that help classify circular economy projects and activities. And the guidance was developed in alignment with the EU framework to support harmonization, but we've adapted it and customized it for Canadian realities and contexts. So I invite you to download the guidance document and explore the content if you haven't already, and see if you can find it useful and ideally find ways to apply it in practice. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass it to Peggy just to tee us up for the global perspective conversation. And over to you, Peggy.
Thank you, Paul. And yes, so from a global perspective, we see that the momentum on circular economy is growing with the policy and regulatory landscape, which is rapidly evolving and more is integrating circular economy principles as a solution for sustainability. And our speakers will share more on this during our session. And so in our work at UNEP FI, we also see a growing interest for circular economy and how it can help to deliver on the broader sustainability agenda and contribute to a healthier and more inclusive economies. So we work at global level and support financial institutions to foster circular economy financing. So for instance, we developed a resource efficiency and circular economy target setting guidance for banks. And we also launched a series of guidance documents on circular economy as an enabler for responsible banking. And this series helps banks around the world to operationalize the interlinkages between the circular economy and climate, nature, pollution, and healthy and inclusive economies, and encourages banks to embed circularity into their internal policies and processes, to engage with their clients in their transition to circular business models, to redirect financial flows towards circular solutions and opportunities, and to advocate for mainstreaming circularity. So that is what we do at global level. At regional level, we work also in different regions. So in Canada, we have seen it through our collaboration with Circular Economy Leadership Canada, but also in other regions, such as in Latin America and the Caribbean, where we launched a report exploring the status of circular economy financing in the region and how to unlock it. With also similar studies and circular economy categorization systems developed at national level. So similar to what we have done in Canada, we are doing the same thing in several countries in the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. So we see a rising interest to tailoring solutions at regional level, taking care of being consistent with global principles and criteria, of course, but also taking into account local context. Another trend that we see also in our work is a rising interest for a sectoral approach of circular economy. And for instance, on plastics, in the context of the current negotiation of an international legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution. And in this field, we convened a finance leadership group on plastics, which provides inputs to the development process of the future plastic treaty and brings the finance perspective. We can go to the next slide. And of course, an important actor in the circular economy field is Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who is working to advance circular economy and circular economy financing, and published, among others, very relevant reports that I invite you to consult, including, for instance, a report on circular economy as a de-risking strategy and driver of superior risk-adjusted returns. And actually, we have the privilege to have with us a representative from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Diego Bermudez, who will share with us a global perspective on the circular economy finance evolving landscape. So Diego is part of the Finance Initiative team at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and his work aims to design solutions that strengthen financial resilience and catalyze investment in circular and regenerative business models. Diego holds a PhD in sustainable business systems and operational resilience, and comes with over a decade of experience in risk analysis and process engineering at Mexico's central bank. So Diego, a warm welcome to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Peggy. Yeah, really, really honored to be here and talking to some fellow people from the Americas. As you mentioned, thank you as well to the Circular Economy Leadership Canada for inviting us. I'm part of the Finance Initiative, as already Peggy mentioned, which goal is to accelerate the transition towards the circular economy through finance. So I will give you a short and sharp insights toward the circular economy evolving landscape from a global perspective, then can hopefully trigger some of the mindset shift and investment needed in the financial sector, specifically in Canada. We can go to the next slide, Paul, please. Thank you. So as already Paul and Peggy mentioned, circular economy is becoming an increasingly global agenda. We have 75 national circular economy calls to action roadmaps, operational strategies, and that have been launched since 99, but just the 71 of them since 2016. So this is, of course, something that triggers a lot of regional strategies and communities of practices that actually encourage greater collaboration amongst the different peer groups and industries. We have also 20% of the country's national determined contributions to our national climate action plans that each country gives under the Paris Agreement, and explicitly mention circular economy actions as part of the solutions. Nevertheless, these actions are included and should be separate in order to target the specific role that, as Paul mentioned, circular economy has towards climate mitigation. Last, we've known that 55% of large businesses have made some kind of circular economy commitment, but we'll talk more about this in the next slide. So we have like regulatory and business drivers, but what are like businesses investing in terms of circularity? So we've seen from research that we did on earnings calls through natural language processing that the top 5 sectors where circular economy strategies are implemented worldwide in order of market cap are consumer staples, industrials, materials, information technology, and consumer discretionary. But the only problem is that of those strategies, most of them are actually related to recycling, which is around 80% of them. Just around 50 to 40% are related to waste reduction or repurposing. And just 30% are thinking of reusing or refilling strategies or even eliminating waste from design. So there's still, as it has already been mentioned, a big gap to fill. If we can go to the next slide. So here we have, probably you already know this diagram by heart. We have the butterfly diagram that shows the material flows within the biological on your left screen, and on the right you'll see the technical cycles. So this diagram actually shows the inner to outer loops, which in the inner loops we have higher business value opportunities, both from the environmental and financial side. This can be in terms of cost savings, such as resource efficiency, which sometimes a lot of people talk about circular economy just being related to that. But actually, there are revenue generating opportunities, just like Paul mentioned, related to circular business models like product as a service, subscription, renting models. And there's another part of circular economy, just like Peggy mentioned in our 2 reports there. We have a de-risking side where if companies invest in circular economy strategies, they reduce investment risk and increase resilience by decoupling economic growth from resource consumption and supply chain disruptions. They're diversifying business models and allowing to better anticipate stricter regulation and changing customer preferences. Next slide, please. So they already talked about a little bit of the EU taxonomy. As we know, the EU taxonomy has 2 delegated acts, one related to climate and the other related to environmental actions. And in this delegated act is where circular economy lies. And this is integrated by 3 factors, like in order to classify economic activities. One is the substantial contribution to one or more of the environmental goals. And the other one is do no significant harm to any of the others. And the last one is the minimum social safeguards, where normally people talk about principles of responsible business, but in the case of Canada, these principles are established to respect the relationship with the Indigenous people. If you can click on the next one. In terms of how this has been implemented related with the CSRD, the directive, and the ESRS, that's the standard, this CSRD has come into force since December 2022. And in 2023, 1,900 companies started disclosing information against the EU taxonomy. Well, from 2024 till 2029, this will grow up to 50,000 organizations. This actually allows us to kind of see and standardize a little bit, or harmonize, like that word better, the different activities that companies are doing in order to provide some investment. Other policy, well, this has been reflected in the circular economy guidance that Paul talked about, that has been one of the leading guidance documents, but we have had other countries talking about or developing this kind of similar guidance, such as Colombia, Peru, Australia, that actually are the things that we need. We need to kind of like people to start creating this basic guidelines. If you click to the next one, please. So in terms of other policies that are important and complementary, we have extended producer responsibility and right to repair, eco-design policies, plastic recycled and content requirement, bans and taxes, and restrictions on hazardous substances that complete the regulatory picture. Next slide, please. So from an internal tracker, we've seen that although the circular economy financing across asset classes has increased, it has actually declined in the past few years from 2021. And the main assets that we've seen where circular economy is financed are bonds, loans, and both private and public equity. And here I just wanted to show some examples of this asset classes. In the case of Philips Healthcare, we have a green bond that they issued a while ago, but this green bond allowed them to transition to circular economy as well as creating both social equality and carbon neutrality. But also, Philips has established that by next year, they will have 25% of the revenue coming from circular business models, which is also part of their current financing model. Then we have Intesa Sanpaolo, which is part of our network, and they have established a credit platform where they issue loans based on the EU taxonomy criteria, but they have adapted this criteria to the specific context of the different regions that they work in. And just in 2023, they evaluated 366 projects having 11.7 billion euros issued in terms of loans. And they have allocated another 8 billion euros from their 2022-2025 business plan. Last, we have the BlackRock Circular Economy Fund that invests globally at least 80% of its total assets in equity securities of companies that are either adopting, enabling, or benefiting from the advancement of the circular economy. They also establish a circular economy criteria that contributes to either environmental or social objectives, do no significant harm objectives, and they establish good governance practices, following a best-in-class approach to include all sectors. You can go to the next slide. So from a more blended finance perspective, we have the example of Europe that has been leading in terms of substantial investments with EU policies, as we've seen. For instance, the European Investment Bank co-financed 132 circular economy projects with 3.8 billion between 2019 and 2023. This, an example is just the European Circular Bioeconomy Fund, a BC fund that invests in innovative companies, and they blend public funds from the EIB with private capital to mobilize significant investments into circular bioeconomy projects across Europe. The next example is the Hamburg Hafen City, and this is a circular nature positive urban development featured in our latest report, Building Prosperity, which showcases the transformation of a former industrial port into a green and socially inclusive downtown area. This project expands 40% without greenfield development, and it's funded by 10 billion in private investment and 3 billion in public funding. Next slide, please. So in terms of financial innovation instruments that we've seen interesting from our perspective or more innovative, I'll just share a couple of examples here. So we have Lloyd's Banks that has partner with the Soil Association Exchange to offer supply chain contracts with payment of ecosystem services. And how it works is that they're piloting an exchange market across supply chain funding model to incentivize regenerative practices. So supply chain businesses contribute funds and farmers receive this payment for existing services over the time as they transition to these practices. But the progress is tracked and verified via the Soil Association Exchange platform, helping supply chain partners to report on initially scope 3 emission reductions, but they have their target as well on more like natural, such as biodiversity and soil health. So this is just one example, and the other one was actually an example suggested by one of the panelists. That's we'll talk later, and this is focused in Australia, where we have a company that through the government, with the help of the government, they have this common user processing hubs for minerals, and this enables critical raw mineral circularity for renewables, such as lithium, cobalt, nickel. And this actually is a great business opportunity because there are just from research, we've seen that 2.6 trillion worth of material in fast-moving consumer goods is either thrown away or discarded and never recovered. So I included an example from a European company called Fairone that actually ensures product leasing with life extension mechanisms and end-of-life treatment that actually works really well in terms of how that they match with this kind of recovery approaches. And so next slide. So, well, this is my last slide. I just wanted to say thank you. And as we've seen, there's an increasing global shift towards circular economy practices through substantial investments and national strategies and standards. But we need a stronger upstream circular design approach. There are guidance such as the Canadian guidance for financial institutions that lay out the first effort to support circular economy projects across different areas. But there are still key financial initiatives that include funding models that could be powered by data and measurement. This needs a mindset shift through that enables collaboration and a systemic approach to fundamentally shift the redesign of products and business models and actually how value creation is measured. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Diego. Thanks for those overview of trends and interesting to see the sort of evolution of the circular finance when you're tracking numbers and just a sort of examples of collaborations with financial institutions on projects with industry and others. We had Intesa Sao Paulo come and speak to our circular finance working group a couple weeks ago, and was interesting to see, the number of projects they've been financing through their innovation center and the sort of support services, and how the banks are working really closely with SMEs and other businesses. So there's a couple of questions we have time for. The first question is a question around credit mechanisms, and how do you see the role of credit mechanisms like plastics credits potentially linking in with the finance frameworks? Are credits helpful, or are they a distraction? Is that something you're tracking at EMF?
Yeah, we've seen plastic credits, becoming one of the instruments that is helping to transition towards circular economy. They're still, as I mentioned, like focused on quite downstream approaches, but the thing is that to build actually this capacity for more ambitious models, you need coordination of capital, and this requires a little bit of a systemic approach. We were talking about this with Intesa San Paulo. They were looking at region transition, and they said, like, we're not the only ones that should provide the financing, but we need to collaborate, with the government, but also with other financial institutions, because depending on the type of solution that we need, or the capability that we need to develop within this value chain that we're looking at, we kind of need to tailor those financial instruments. And this is the case of plastic credits. I think once once we have you know, a good set of financial instruments that adapts a little bit towards the solution we're specifically looking for. For example, we've published a reuse paper where we looked into how to develop a reuse infrastructure within France, and this can, depending on the specific context, you need to work together with different parts of the system, even like corporates, you know, and even the consumers to finance and align all the incentives there.
Mhm. Thanks for unpacking that a little bit. There's another question here, I think coming from a smaller business, an SME, or even a startup, actually, a company that you know, is looking to scale, and you know, obviously they're probably coming forward with an innovative business model that is not always recognized by traditional financial you know, measures at times. So I guess, are you tracking at all the investments into small businesses and startups with some of the metrics on financial investments in the global picture? And are you seeing, you know, enough investment going towards these innovative business models for startups, et cetera, in a range that match kind of the needs of these startups as opposed to, say, larger projects for industrial partners, et cetera?
Yeah, this is something that actually is targeted from a, you know, risk perspective. Like I think like most companies that are venture capitalists, they look into circular economy as a high risk area, and that's something that we've seen that a lot of you know, companies, they don't invest as much as they could, because actually you have competing interests there with other types of technologies. And this is where, you know, we need like that fundamental rethinking of what's value and how to you know, fund these business models. Because we do track some investments from VCs, but also we have a circular startup index where we see some of the companies that are actually trying to, you know, impact or having this kind of really relevant interventions within the system. But it's always a matter, what we've seen is that it's always they get it to a pilot stage, and when it needs to go to that scale up level, that's where the financing becomes scarce,
Mhm.
and there's not enough volume actually to
Right.
finance the startups.
There's a gap that's needed to bridge that sort of valley of death or the scale up commercialization side.
Yeah, yeah, true.
Okay, thank you for flagging that. There's a few other questions. Maybe I could invite you to just have a look at the Q&A box and answer those in writing. Type in some answers just to keep our agenda on schedule. And thank you very much, Diego, for your time and just for sharing that insight. And we'll package up your slides with the summary that goes out if you're okay with that.
Yeah, perfect. Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. So a question about when are we going to talk about Canada? So here we are talking about the Canadian perspectives on circular finance, and we'd now like to invite our panel from across Canada financial leaders to join us, who are going to provide some reflections on what they've just heard around the global trends and what they're seeing in the Canadian landscape, and also the broader linkages to ESG and sustainable finance goals and activities in Canada. So I'll just start by introducing Garrett Jones, who's Vice President of Corporate Sustainability and Finance Sector Lead at Delphi. Garrett is a seasoned financial services professional who has worked for multiple financial institutions and insurance companies in various roles and departments over the years. We've also been working with Garrett and the Delphi team on our circular finance in Canada work now since it launched in 2022. So Garrett, over to you to introduce the panel and leave it to you to have a bit of a conversation.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Paul, for the introduction, and thank you so much, Diego. Well, that was it's so impressive and interesting to see what is happening here globally. And now I'm looking forward to have this exciting conversation to take it more down to the Canadian context. So again, my name is Garrett. I'm excited to be moderating this amazing panel here over the next 40 minutes. We got quite a few questions and various topics to try and navigate. We are asking, please put in questions as we go through this discussion. We'll try and get to a few of them at the end. If we're not able to, we'll be able to respond here in our post-webinar memo that Paul's going to be sending out. With that being said, I'm excited to introduce Patricia, the Director of Sustainable Finance at Scotiabank, Rowan, the Vice President of Public Affairs, Communication, and EDI at Coast Capital Savings. Finally, but definitely not least, Maya, Acting Executive Director at the Sustainable Institute for Sustainable Finance. So I'm going to ask each of the panels there, on the first question, please, you'll provide a little bit more about kind of your background, yourself, and some of the things that you're working on within your organization. But we've really assembled, this panel to provide different perspectives at different different areas within our economy. We look at Coast Capital really supporting a lot of the small to medium-sized businesses, within their communities. Scotiabank, Patricia, with her experience within the capital markets and supporting large corporations, and then Maya, really with the with the Institute of Sustainable Finance, the all-seeing eye, we'll say. But with that, being said, I want to jump into this. We're really seeing organizations of all sizes, that are looking to embrace circular economy models. And circular economy helps organizations not only meet their sustainability goals, but as we've heard, it creates operational efficiencies, reduces dependencies on virgin materials, and global supply chains that are increasingly becoming less reliable, whether it's through the pandemic, through potential trade wars, things of that nature. And so what I really want to bring this conversation to, and I'll hand it over to the panel, is looking at some of the global trends that Diego's provided us. How are we seeing circular economy initiatives really take shape and manifest here in a Canadian economy, and looking at, your networks, your partners, your clients, and, your ecosystems? How are you really starting to see it? And last thing I'll say here is, I know it is very nascent, within the Canadian context. We saw that figure 6% of, circular of businesses, of the economy, is, circular economy, or would align with that concept. But, what are you seeing? And so I'm going to hand it off to the panel here. Maya, I'm going to ask you to kick us off, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Garrett. It's nice to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about what we do, and in the context of circular economy, and especially applaud the efforts of the Circular Economy Leadership Canada. And as you said, Garrett, I think the current state of circular economy in Canada is nascent, and the value proposition of circularity in relation to reduction of GHG emissions, or de-risking investments, and preservation of nature really needs to be communicated better. And currently, I feel there is a strong disconnect between climate mitigation activities and sustainable finance efforts and the circular economy work. And it would be really great to bring the two worlds together. So, a positive sign I'm seeing is globally, in terms of green regulations popping up, and as we try to harmonize what we're doing here in Canada with kind of the global frameworks, as Diego mentioned, for example, the CSRD will affect a significant number of European companies, right? Well, today it's also capturing a significant number of Canadian companies that have representation in Europe. So I think that harmonization piece will really be crucial, and focusing on the common language element will be key here. And I am hopeful that investments in circularity will start picking up from here on.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you, Maya, for kind of your insights. I'm going to hand it over to Rowan. Rowan.
Thank you, Garrett. As Garrett said, my name's Rowan. I head up Public Affairs and Communications at Coast Capital. I know we have people from all over the world here today. It's pretty amazing to see you all introducing yourselves in the chat, and thank you for that. Coast Capital, we're a federal financial cooperative and member-owned credit union, and our social purpose is to build better futures by unlocking financial opportunities and growing incomes. And so we see that we have a role to play in supporting our members and communities in this transition to a more regenerative economy. And so really pleased to be part of this conversation today, and thanks for having me. In terms of, where we are at, I think we've heard, we could frame it as not quite far as others, but I think what's important is that we have a really significant opportunity here in Canada, and particularly if you consider, our economy has a high reliance on extractive industries. So, I think about that a lot. And, it's been said, I think probably many of us on the line today are actively looking at how do we advance these emissions sort of reductions initiatives, these sustainability goals and targets. And, I think we're beginning to incorporate the circular economy within that. But really, this is just the tip of the iceberg. In terms of local small to mid-sized businesses, we just had a question on that. And I can tell you at Coast Capital, we operate nationally. We have a federal license, but we have strong roots in British Columbia. And, looking at these small to medium-sized businesses that we're working with in our markets, we can see that the circular economy is starting to really take off, particularly in some regions like Vancouver Island, which is where I am calling in from today. And so lots of momentum in construction, building materials, manufacturing. And so more and more we're seeing that these businesses need us, right? They need us as financial institutions to really come to the table. And so we are at the beginning of our journey, Coast Capital included, but I think the point here is that as financial institutions and policymakers, we need to really start looking at the role we play in advancing the circular economy for businesses of all shapes and sizes.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much, Ron. I mean, it's yeah, no surprise that small to medium sized enterprise and businesses are really the bedrock of the Canadian economy. So thank you for kind of providing the insights from that perspective. I'd like to turn it over to Patricia. I know you deal with a lot of corporations of different sizes across different sectors, that are having a positive impact moving forward. Really looking forward to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Garrett. And thank you to the Circular Economy Leadership Canada for having us today. My name is Patricia Drainville. I am a director on Scotiabank's Sustainable Finance team. We are a team within the global banking and markets, capital markets team within the bank. Scotiabank, as many know, is one of Canada's top banks. We operate internationally and have clients all over the world. So our work does really span many sectors. My focus is of course on the larger corporate clients, but having spoken a little bit about the small medium enterprises, this is very much a value chain discussion around circularity, and which is really what's been exciting. And I'd say I think we're kind of in chapter 2 of the circular economy journey in Canada. When the UN development framework was introduced, SDG 12 was very powerful in helping organizations map their materiality to the goals in terms of their contributions and their impacts across the value chain. So SDG 12, responsible production and consumption, obviously focus on several areas of the circularity conversation, managing natural resources, increasing resource efficiency, following waste cycles and building recyclable practices, as well as focusing more on the procurement part of our sustainability impact. And so I think it was a very powerful tool. And if those listening have not yet done that type of mapping, it's very useful, I think, in terms of bringing circular economy up to kind of an equal playing field as many of the other sustainability topics of climate change and biodiversity. With that, I think we've seen lots of policy from the government of Canada, and obviously at different provincial levels, there's been collaboration across all levels of government, industry, not-for-profit, and academia to focus on programs and policies that can actually advance circularity and waste management. So that's been really exciting, I think, from a Canadian context at a high level. And in that response, Canadian companies and those globally have rallied around circular solutions. So where I sit, I'm really excited about 2 sectors in particular. Rowan already mentioned construction, but also mining, and specifically the cement industry have been doing incredible things around thinking about their broader greenhouse gas contributions to global emissions. and with that have really seen their role as an input to many of the downstream products that are created using their fundamental products, so critical minerals, but of course cement and concrete. So the Canadian critical mineral strategy is focused very much on circular economy. The goal there from the Government of Canada is to reduce waste, reuse end-of-life products, recycle the minerals, and we've seen lots of companies again respond. Teck, Glencore has been focused on recycling and recovering materials. So these are just real examples that are happening today. The other industry that we've spoken about is cement, and I think the buildings and construction industry, because of how incredibly much it's scaling, that is driving a lot of demand for cement product. And as a result, we've seen that conversation around embodied carbon scale. And with that, I think we can talk a little bit more about the really exciting clean tech technologies that are emerging from that. And I think Rowan is really at the center, and Coast Capital is at the center of all that. And Scotiabank as well. I think across where we sit, we are having lots of great conversations with even our clean tech partners as they look to partner with some of our large corporates. So lots of great collaboration around the value chain, and that's really what excites me today.
Oh, thank you, Patricia. 100% agree. I mean, when you look at, technology as a disruptor, whether you're a massive corporation here in Canada, regardless the sector, whether you're a small, to medium-sized organization that's looking to help to bring a technology to market to disrupt, right, and create efficiencies, less reliant on virgin materials. I mean, there's significant opportunity here in the Canadian context. And speaking of that opportunity, I mean, Paul, noted that it's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. Diego talked about, circular economy as cost saving and revenue generating. We talked about it as being able to be a de-risking investment, right? And to support the de-risking. Yet, just on this call alone, we had 50% of the respondents on the poll state that they're having challenges funding their CE initiatives. And we've talked about it, being kind of still like very at the, well, I like how you said, Patricia, kind of step two, right? Just, we're taking our second step here as it relates to circular economy initiatives. So, that really leads me to the next question to the panel is, as we look at some of these barriers to capital flows, so what are some of the barriers that, that we're seeing? And, Patricia, you alluded to, there is quite a bit of policy moving forward coming out of the government. Now, we can't only be reliant on policy, but, is more policy needed to support barriers? Is there different framing or different thinking from the deployment of capital that's required to, again, think beyond the 5 traditional C's of credit or credit risk management? And then, on the other side of that coin, again, looking at the opportunity side, let's not forget about that opportunity side. So, I pose this question to this panel here. What are some of the main barriers that are preventing capital flow for circular economy businesses and/or initiatives? Whether at a small to medium-sized enterprise, or a a Series A raise for a disruptive technology, or at a large corporate side. And what are some of the biggest opportunities as you see within innovative financing? And looking to Diego's presentation, looking at some of EU and Australia, some of the innovative ways of financing and thinking about how we can deploy those capitals. So again, those barriers and opportunities. I'm going to go back to Rowan here. Would love to hear your thoughts. Have you kick us off?
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. I mean, I think you've named the main barrier as far as I can see. The most significant factor is the current valuation practices, right? And sort of risk assessments and practices, quite simply considering collateral or assets, right? These practices were designed for linear business models. And so I think, Patricia has painted a great picture here. There is positive momentum in the right direction, but I think generally we still think quite traditionally about deploying capital. And the promise of a circular economy requires us to think differently and finance innovation. So how are we going to do that? And it's not insignificant in terms of solving for. There's lots of interconnected parts here. But I think that there are ways that we can get started. And I always find that, it's very useful to look at sort of proof of concept or related programs that are working. And one that I sometimes think about, and that, there's been some recent stories circulating at Coast Capital around our commercial real estate members who have been benefiting from the CMHC MLI Select program. Some of you might know what this is. If you don't, it's really about reduced insurance premiums, longer amortization periods being available for multi-unit housing that is climate change compatible. So, there's a benefit to really embedding this. So how do we implement programs like this with a lens to advancing circular, as an example? I would also take the opportunity, Garrett, with my communications hat on here, an opportunity that I see for all of us. I think, there's a lot of sustainability, climate, circular folks that are very, very involved in this movement on the line today. But I think when I look at financial institutions, we need to consider and remember that not everybody knows what the circular economy is. Not everybody understands what circular finance means, right? And we can't actually move the needle without, engaging our business partners in risk and commercial and business banking and bringing them along with us to solve these problems together. So that's my sort of quick communications plug. We need to remember that we need others at the table with us, and we need to help build the education and awareness there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Training, awareness, upskilling, opportunity. Thank you for putting on your comms hat there, Rowan. I'm going to hand it over to Patricia. Patricia, I'd love to hear your thoughts on barriers and opportunities. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. I think it's been, circular economy is just good for the bottom line. I think this is, many companies do see that as positive impact. Just greater resource efficiency. So when we think of upstream use of products and just using less is good. On the waste side of things, of course, proper disposal has its challenges, and I think a lot of the circular solutions do rely on very clean waste streams. And from what I understand, the waste collection and the sorting backdrop does hinder the development and the scaling of some of our circular solutions. And so building greater awareness, greater education on how to properly sort so that we do have these cleaner sources or more pure sources for that can go back into these closed loop systems. Like this is really where I hear from our clients that can be the most challenging part. The technologies are there. There's been lots of different infrastructure that's been identified as what's going to help us solve some of these solutions. I think on the challenge side, there's still some concern that there's no that customers aren't willing to pay for it. So that there isn't a premium yet for recycled plastic products, for example, or some of these more circular, sustainable solutions. And so that in itself needs to be, really dealt with, I think, in terms of the consumer. Policies can help make that work, but I do think that this should be a demand-driven solution. On a lot of these kind of bigger scale circular alternatives, there may be some hesitation in the efficacy of it, like the substitutes may be compromising traditional structures. I know we hear that a lot from the construction world, the cement world. Again, will it last? Will it kind of maintain its structure? These are these are big projects. Can we really afford to try different alternatives? So there's a lot of different piloting happening to really sort of demystify that and prove to the end customer that this is an alternative, a good alternative and sustainable solution. So, Rowan mentioned a couple of different programs that her organization is working on. I think where we sit in our team, we really are kind of at the core of the sustainable finance market. This has been the biggest, in my the taxonomies that we're looking to develop here in Canada, but also those that already exist globally, green bond principles. Diego did mention some statistics around the market. We have, seen the sustainable finance market be around $1 trillion a year. We're trending towards, 1.4 in bonds and loans this year. This is really where I think the most opportunity lies for clients, in that they can, they can be part of this. There's capital out there that is looking for a home around sustainability efforts, and we've seen within the green bond principles, specifically the circular economy and eco-efficient resources and processes and activities, be one of the sort of 10 categories that exist in the GBP, where we can really target. And the chem sector has been one of the sort of most exciting ones to watch for me this year. Over 70% of investment grade chemical bond issuance has been in green labeled format, again, targeting molecular mechanical recycling infrastructure that they plan to build out, so that they can provide recycled polymers to end customers like the bottling, Pepsi Cola, other sort of plastics users. So lots of really exciting initiatives. Amazon sustainability bond, looking, with the data center growth that they expect. Again, one of their use of proceeds is sustainable construction practices and materials, again, in the cement sector with Wholesome. I've mentioned the chemical names before. We're also seeing sustainable finance goals be linked to circular targets. Here locally in Canada, we've got Gildan, who's in the fashion textiles, looking at using increasing their recycled polyester fibers. We've got lots to name, H&M, a lot of the fashion is, this is really a big part of where Ellen MacArthur Foundation plays, but also, again, on the industrial side, food waste for Carrefour. This is a European company, but again, circular economy targeting, less waste. Ultimately, we've seen great targets linked to decreasing food waste, decreasing carbon emissions per cementous ton of material. These are just some examples. And on the flip side, there are investors who are looking to invest. So Diego mentioned the BlackRock Fund, Amundi, ClearBridge, Fidelity. They all have a number of equity funds that are linked to circular economy and have a circular economy focus within where they're looking to deploy capital. So the market exists. I think the scaling is really where we need to go, and actually deploying some of that capital in some of those funds. So again, an exciting future and a great market that exists for our clients.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. We really traversed across, multiple sectors there, looking at some of the, the opportunities. I think of, demystifying, especially for, capital markets advisors, for, commercial bankers, understanding, this new opportunity, right? And yes, there is significant money out there that is being committed and deployed to circular economy initiatives, but how do we get it in the hands of those small and medium-sized, companies? And with that, I really want to move over to you here, Maya. Patricia touched on the taxonomy. Paul and Diego both talked about, sustainable finance taxonomies across the globe. And we alluded to the Canadian taxonomy there. So the Sustainable Finance Action Council had released the roadmap to the sustainable finance taxonomy there early in 2023. Yourself, you were actually at the Sustainable Finance Forum last week, and I know Sustainable Finance Institute was involved in that. And it would really be curious to hear from your perspective and what you're hearing and what you're seeing, in the Canadian taxonomy. Where are we as it relates to to the bringing that online, if you will, and how do you see circular economy and, let's say, the work that we've done here within this work stream to create a circular finance guidance document or taxonomy? How do you see that maybe integrating or being a part of a more comprehensive taxonomy down the road? Maya.
Thanks, Garrett. Yeah. So as you all know, Institute for Sustainable Finance was one of the core knowledge partners to SFAC, which was a federally mandated body that had 25 financial institutions represented. And as you said, Garrett, the taxonomy roadmap report was released in 2022. And what it is a blueprint for what a Canadian taxonomy would look like. And something unique is that all 25 financial institutions signed off on that roadmap. And you can all probably appreciate what it's like to work with so many different stakeholders and having them all agree on something. It's impressive. So it makes the work going forward a lot easier. SFAC's mandate concluded in January. But in October of this year, the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, at the PRI conference in Toronto announced that the government is committing to an action plan around a Made in Canada, a voluntary taxonomy. So it would not be mandatory, but a voluntary guidance. And the government committed to establishing an arm's length governance structure, which would help to categorize investments based on scientifically determined eligibility criteria, targeting net zero emissions by 2050, keeping with the 1.5 degrees Celsius to pre-industrial levels. So the announcement stated that after the governance structure is established, it would focus on 2 to 3 priority sectors. And on ISF website, we have the sector prioritization survey if you're curious as to taking a look as to how and why certain sectors were determined. I think the next step will be really figuring out the pathways for decarbonization for each sector. And that's where, circularity will be increasingly important. And the guidance document that was created will really complement the efforts targeting net zero goals. And I know that many people tuning in today are probably concerned that the Canadian taxonomy only focuses on climate mitigation and, not necessarily on other environmental objectives as is done in the EU, for example. But you can appreciate, like I said, given the number of stakeholders involved in the development process of a taxonomy, the thinking was that focusing on one major environmental objective will really help to release it faster and kickstart the implementation and mobilization of private capital. So don't be too alarmed. This is not final. It's an evolving, I think, it'll continue to evolve and change. It'll be more than just mitigation. It'll, be more about how we act as stewards for our society and our, environment. And as we target mitigation, the rollout of clean energy technologies, will fuel demand for critical minerals to produce wind power, solar power. And it's something that's very real. Mining these minerals can be a dirty process, which is, concentrated in a handful of countries. So Canadian companies are already seeking ways to diversify their supply chains and reduce their dependence on, imports from other countries. And with a taxonomy, the Canadian taxonomy has a very specific do no significant. And to align with the transition, more companies will look into creating a circular economy, I think, for critical energy transition materials. And that's where the guidance document will really help Canadian companies, particularly because of the, with the, for example, the DNSH criteria. So, going back to priority sectors, like I think agriculture will have to look into, there's certain regenerative processes that will have to be integrated. A healthy soil to feed Canada and meet our GHG targets. There's certain elements that will absolutely be integrated. And the challenge moving forward will be to, tailor this guidance created by the Circular Economy Leadership Canada to each priority sector and balancing that with the climate ambition and practicality. I think the alignment elements of a tech reduce multiplicity of data requests and provide, overall transparency over time, but it's something we'll get to. That's the goal. And I do think in terms of going back to the opportunities, and maybe I digress a bit, that the green bonds market really flourished after EU adopted its taxonomy. And I'm hopeful that it'll pick up, and that's where circularity will have a significant impact. There's potential for growth.
Again, consistent theme, opportunity across sectors, especially, in, here in Canada, right? Yes, we're a, resource extractive economy and country, but yet significant opportunity. Just a time check here. We only got a few minutes. Want to make sure we get everyone out of here on time. Thank you so much to the panel. There's some great questions that were asked within the Q&A. A couple questions here. One, some of the scientific sources that larger FIs are relying on for making decisions around risk. Part of phase 2 of this working group, where we have the three of you on this, is to identify those. And one of the ones that we're looking to right now, again, Europe, is the European Circular Economy scorecard. So it's the Circular Risk Scorecard. It's just beginning its journey, and it's a great way to layer on over top of existing risk management practices within financial institutions. I'm going to hand it back. So I just want to say thank you everyone for joining. Thank you to the panel. Maya gave us some great outputs on some of the opportunities. Ryan and Patricia, like 30-45 seconds just to finish off. One or two opportunities that you see moving forward here in, from your perspective as it relates to CE in the circular economy, in the Canadian context. Patricia, I see you're off mute.
Sure, I can go quick. I did want to mention that we have at Scotiabank a sustainable finance climate commitment to $350 billion by of deployed funds by 2030. This is guided by a climate-related financing framework. So we were talking about standards and guidelines. It is informed by global standards, global taxonomies. When the Canadian taxonomy is released, we will further align to this. The circular economy guidelines that were released by CELC were helpful in informing a lot of those categories where we look to deploy capital. So within that, we absolutely see more growth, more allocation from our bank to many of the different areas as our clients continue to look to invest. So this is a global, many of our banks globally, not only in Canada, have sustainable finance commitments, of which circular economy is one of them. So there is lots of support from the financial institution community. We look to support our clients in advisory and in scaling and bringing partners together, in bringing up our clean tech community. So this is really the role as an intermediary to really bring together this ecosystem, and we are guided by our climate commitment to sustainable finance. So very excited for the future. Thank you again, everybody.
Very exciting. Ron.
Awesome. Thank you. I think the guidance document has been mentioned a few times here. I'll take the opportunity to mention it again. It's a powerful tool, and if you haven't looked at it, I would encourage you to do so. I also think it's one of those means to, awareness and education to move things forward. And just, back to the incredible audience on the line here. I think, we all have influence and can be part of moving this forward. And I really think that our voices matter. And so I just want to take the opportunity to encourage you all to, to take this forward and be part of building the circular economy and advancing it for the future. So I know we're tight on time, and I'll leave it there. Thanks, Garrett.
Yeah, love it, Ron. We had a presenter there at our group last week and said, ask not what the circular economy can do for you, but what you can do for the circular economy. So some motivational, inspirational quotes. Paul, I'll leave it to you to the last, for the last word. Thank you so much to the panelists and, and everyone participating here today.
Yes, thank you very much. And there was lots of interest in the chat box and Q&A. And as I mentioned in the chat, I will extract the questions we didn't get to and share that back as part of a summary. But a big thanks to Garrett and Rowan and Maya and Patricia, and to Diego as well for your time today and for your participation. Just to wrap things up, and I'll invite Peggy back as well. Wanted to mention that CELC and UNEP FI continue to work in this space. There's a Circular Finance in Canada Workstream 2.0 that we're actually working on with a more diverse group of finance and insurance sector partners, and including the Institute for Sustainable Finance and the Responsible Investment Association. The purpose here is really to help financial institutions in Canada better understand the risks and the opportunities for lending and investing in ensuring circular economy related businesses and projects and infrastructure. So certainly part of this is understanding what are the tools, the mechanisms, what are the gaps, and this is the start of this conversation in Canada, really. So we're going to hopefully see a diversity of more support out there in the years to come. And the part of this will be a risk and opportunities assessment that will be shared with the financial institutions. I also just wanted to say that we are going to be hosting the Canadian Circular Economy Summit, which is Canada's largest flagship circular economy event in April next year, April 15th to 17th in Montreal, with our partners, the Circular Innovation Council. And CCES, or the summit, will provide an opportunity for more than 900 leaders from across sectors and industries to come together to share sort of the leading efforts and activities focused on advancing and accelerating a circular economy in Canada. And we have a broad range of topics and sessions underway that are under development, focused on how circular economy can help tackle some of Canada's biggest challenges, whether it's climate or food security or competitiveness, and linking to the Circular Economy Action Plan for Canada that we released last year, one of which will be a focus on finance and investment as a critical enabler. And so we'll have sessions on infrastructure financing and on de-risking solutions to scale circular economy, and really focused on really matchmaking for SMEs and financial institutions and other partners. So invite you to participate in that. And maybe just on behalf of CELC and UNEP FI, a big thank you again to our speakers, Diego for your global perspectives, and Garrett for facilitating that conversation. And thanks to everybody on the line here for your interest in this topic, obviously being part of today's discussion. We'll share back the event recording and the slide deck following today's webinar. Please reach out if you would like more information about the work we're doing or might like to join our network. And we invite you to stay connected through CELC using our monthly newsletter, to stay in the loop on upcoming events and other activities for partnership and collaboration, and hope to see you at the summit. Peggy, maybe last word to you.
Yes, and
oh, there we go.
Yeah. I cannot put my video on, but really very exciting to see this collaboration, because collaboration is absolutely key to unlock circular financing. So a multi-stakeholder collaboration, public-private collaboration, policymakers and businesses and finance collaboration is key. So it's what we have seen in this session today. Exciting to continue this journey all together. Thank you all.
Wonderful. Thanks. Our contact info is here. Please reach out if you have any questions or would like to follow up. Take care. Thanks. Have a great rest of your week.